Stuff 3 News, Stuff 3 News, that sounds weird, eh? 3 News and Stuff, Get Stuffed with 3 News, tonight had an interesting story about about the census and it looks like it's a world first question asked in the census about the LGBT community and how they're housed and how much their housing is in peril. Let's have a listen.
13,000 more people in New Zealand are severely housing deprived compared to the previous census. As a percentage of the population, it's an estimated increase of 0.2%. But there are large disparities between ethnicities, abilities and your postcode. Laura Tupor reports.
Cyclone Gabrielle wreaked havoc just before the 2023 census was scheduled to be taken. And for Gisborne, the wild weather event exacerbated an area that was already experiencing relatively high rates of homelessness.
There's a chronic problem in terms of some very inadequate kind of housing, places without kind of electricity, etc. And so it's likely that the severe weather events have compounded it.
Joining Bulla, that was also pummeled by poor weather, to top the housing deprivation stats by area. It's just the second time Stats NZ has identified people's housing or lack of.
That includes people living without shelter, that's your classic people on the streets, but also people who are couch surfing, sharing someone else's private dwelling, but don't have the right to live there, people in uninhabitable housing, and people in temporary accommodation, including things like night shelters, women's refuges.
Notably, the number of people rough sleeping or in an improvised dwelling increased 29.5% from 7.8 per 10,000 in 2018 to 10.1 per 10,000 in 2020.
The numbers are shocking. And it's interesting in this story, they give the stats for the LGBT community versus the general public, and then they say the disabled community, and then they say the Pacific Island disabled community, and the Pacific Island disabled community is like 2.5 times that of the LGBT community, but they don't put a graphic back up, and it's like, because it goes from like 400 per 10,000 to 1,000. It's just unreal, the number, and they don't really highlight it, so we will as we go through with some of these stats.
23. And those in temporary accommodation increased 63.7%.
Yeah, but that's because of COVID. People being put in temporary accommodation because of COVID.
From 17.1 per 10,000 to 28 per 10,000.
The temporary accommodation is likely to have been boosted a bit by the investment in emergency and transitional housing that occurred because of COVID.
It's thought to be a world first,
this is it.
Asking people who identify as LGBTQI+ about their housing situation.
We found at the time of the 2023 census there were over 4,400 rainbow people who were living in severe housing deprivation. So that's a higher rate than for the general population.
And for disabled communities, 414.5 per 10,000 are severely housing deprived.
So just think of that, severely housing deprived. So that's on another level than housing deprived, obviously. But just listen to these numbers, because I'm pretty sure they come back and they talk about the disabled community within the Pacific Island community, and I think they say 1,000 per 10,000. So it's like 2.5 times the general disabled group. So the general disabled group is like double the general population, and the Pacific Island disabled group are 2.5 times the disabled group, which is shocking.
That's more than double the 203.7 per 10,000 of non-disabled people.
One thing that really shocked us was how high it was for Pacific people with disabilities.
Yep.
It's almost 1,000 disabled Pacific people per 10,000.
Now, I have no idea why they decided not to show a graphic for that, but amongst Pacific people, 1,000 per 10,000. So 2.5 times the disabled people and 5 times the non-disabled people's groups. It's just. I mean, that's a crisis in and of itself.
The Pacific population.
So even though the estimated population increase in homelessness was 0.2%, the impact of the issue is not evenly distributed between communities.
Shocking, Chewie. Shocking. Not sure what we can do about it. I know that you've had a bit of a passion at times about, various places in Dunedin being available whilst people sleep under the motorway and stuff.
Yeah, so there was a little bit of a follow-up on that story because the people that were camping next to the motorway near the Oval down here in Dunedin in tents through the hardest part of winter, and we had a death in that community as well, which was quite shocking to me that we're at that stage where people will die in a tent because there's not a house for them. So they got moved on, and everybody goes, "Oh, cool! There's no tents in the Oval anymore. I guess they found them housing." The council came through with a report, and yeah, sure, they're not in the Oval. The rate of unhoused people in Dunedin has not changed.
They are in the Oval,
So
by the way.
Yeah, there's a couple of tents back there now. It's certainly not what it was. But at the point where they all disappeared, they didn't all get homes. Yeah. So this just drives me fucking crazy. I saw this announcement on Facebook just before we went to air. Now again, this is a local story, but I'll give you some context for it.
But only people from Dunedin watch this, eh? Everyone who watches this comes from Dunedin, yeah. Just like the outer suburbs, just the outer suburbs of Dunedin, like Wellington, just the northernmost suburbs of Dunedin, like Whangarei. Sorry,
chat. This is me saying, look out for this in your community.
Yeah,
okay. Because if it's happening here, it's happening elsewhere. So the West Harbour Community Board announces, "We're saddened to hear that the Kaingaroa's Albertson Ave rebuild has been cancelled. We will continue to advocate for much needed social housing on the site. Kaingaroa advised that contractors will be clearing up the untidy section over the coming weeks, and the fencing and the shipping container will be removed soon." This was going to be a site for, I believe, 6 houses. In Dunedin, there's a couple or more empty section Kaingaroa projects. I expect that they will be cancelled before Christmas, and I would imagine that if in your communities you have similar sort of, they've earmarked a site for social housing, they haven't built anything yet, that they will be cancelled as well. So in conjunction with that piece that we just saw that just says we have a crisis of homelessness or underhousing, and it's negatively affecting a whole bunch of people, but specifically disabled people, specifically Pacific people, specifically Maori, specifically disabled Māori and Pacific peoples, the government is deciding not to build houses. That the solution is in the free market. Which, if you have a choice, if you're a landlord and you have a choice of an able-bodied tenant that doesn't need a ramp or anything like that, or the disabled one, which one do you choose? Free market.
And remember, there's a micro and there's a macro to this conversation. The bigger picture is, with the government slowing down on their builds, gives less work for tradespeople, who then look for where they can get work, who then go to Australia, who then, when Kaingaroa want to start the build-ups again under a Labour government, let's be honest, the tradies have gone and we can't then get the work done, and it runs super slow, and then Labour gets blamed for doing nothing. That's the cycle we're looking at, whānau.
17,000 tradies have left for Australia at this point. Their work dried up. The apprentices were all let go. Building companies will start to fail. Your sole traders will be completely fucked. That work dries up, and somebody else comes back in and kickstarts it, or we need more builders. Then the only opportunity there, because you won't get them back from Aussie, you won't, is to import workers cheaply.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. It is, well, I've said it before, it's one of my slogans. I might as well get a tattoo one day. This government understands the cost of everything and the value of nothing. And we've had 3 stories today, and they all illustrate that point. That same point. Humanity's no value.